I wanted to talk about something I'm dealing with right now. It's like this fucking slippery slope. Like when you compromise on one thing, how it kind of leads to more and more compromises. And I got a bunch of shit written out here, but I want to start just kind of defining what I mean by that. So like, let's just say you're trying to live a different kind of lifestyle than you normally do. And this could apply to a lot of different things. I know I talk about like health and fitness a lot, but this is where I'm dealing with it right now. But a little later on, I'm also going to talk about some other things where I've seen this happen and other examples where it might apply. But in actuality, it can apply to just about anything. But let me get into it because I'm already rambling. What I'm talking about here is like for me, for example, what's happening right now is, as I mentioned, I broke my toe and it kind of threw off my exercise. And then I think that was a worthwhile thing to sort of, I don't even know if that would fall under the category, but it was a worthwhile thing to sort of step away from just temporarily until my foot healed up. It was like, but what I'm talking about are the times when you call something off when you know you should and you don't really have a good reason to. So for example, like I like to be healthy. So that requires eating healthy and it requires exercise and moving around and shit. For the most part, I don't necessarily enjoy all of those things. You know, I do like the food that I eat. You know, I've been eating healthy food for a long enough period of time to where I've found a lot of recipes that I like. And I've learned how to cook and season things in the way that, you know, they really do taste just as good as the shitty food, but there's still kind of like a draw to like those sugary things or, you know, stuff with extra fat or kind of like fast food type of shit. There's always that kind of draw to want to eat that stuff. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. So even though I want to live that life, there's always like times when I have to kind of talk myself out of doing something that I'm not supposed to do. And when it comes to exercise, for most of the time I have to really talk myself into doing that because it's not something I really enjoy doing. And so like a good example of a compromise would be, you know, I wake up in the morning, I'm all tired. I do my kind of basic routines, have a cup of coffee, drink, read my 10 pages. And then after I read my 10 pages and get a meditation session in, that's when I'm supposed to work out. So a lot of times when it gets to that point where I'm supposed to work out, I really have to kind of tell myself, hey man, it's time to get this done. And so if I choose not to do that, let's say I'm on a good kind of pattern, I guess you could say. I'm working out 6 days a week. Not doing 75 hard right now. I'm just kind of like working out 6 days a week and kind of doing everything else. I'll get back on 75 hard a little later, but right now I want to try this thing. I read this book called Simple and Sinister. I don't know. It's worth checking out. It's pretty cool. It's like this kettlebell workout. So I really wanted to try that. So that's what I'm doing 6 days a week. And it's pretty easy to get myself to do that even after a few days in a row because you get a streak going. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's say, you know, I'm on a good path and everything's going well. And then one day I'm like, you know what? I just really don't feel like working out. And that's the kind of compromise I'm talking about. So it's not the kind of compromise where I'm like, you know what? I got some lower back pain. I think it'd probably be better to rest today so I can get after it tomorrow. That's not the same thing. It's when you know you should do something, but you make a conscious decision to not do it simply because you don't want to do it. And you let that sort of inner dialogue win that little battle with yourself. And so anyway, back to like what I'm dealing with currently, like I'm back on the exercise, but over the time while I was waiting for my foot to heal and I was kind of taking it easy, I sort of compromised a little bit too much on my food. And so I'm never, ever going back to where I was. And that was I was never like massively overweight, but I'd probably say like 60 pounds overweight was like the heaviest I ever got, which is just, you know, it's not healthy. And I don't ever want to go back to that. But that being said, I did compromise quite a bit over these last few weeks. And I really see the effects of it, So now I have these workout shorts that I wear all the time, and they don't fit. They don't fit as good as they used to. They're kind of tight, and there's certain shirts I can't wear right now. I mean, I'll get it back together pretty quickly with clean food and exercise. I didn't go that far off the rails, but the fact is this is what I wanted to talk about. It's a slippery slope. And the further down the slope you get, the easier, well, I would say the harder it is to get back on track. So like I said, it starts with like one compromise, right? And maybe that was like me deciding not to work out because I had broke my big toe. I probably could have worked out. So I don't know if I should or shouldn't have. And I talked about that already, so I'm not going to get too far into it. Maybe I could have, and maybe that was the compromise that started leading down the path. And so what's interesting about the slippery slope is like, not only when you compromise in one area, it starts making it easier to compromise in other areas. So the not working out anymore sort of gave my brain a little bit of a free pass, so to speak, to compromise on my food a little bit more. And then, I'm kind of in sort of a mental rut a little bit with work and the things that I'm supposed to be doing with work. Like I'm working all the time, but like I'm not being as productive as I should be. I think that's also kind of tying in a way, like compromising in one area allows compromises in other areas. So, when you compromise also, it could kind of impact like your perceived failure, so to speak. So like, let's say you're on a diet or you've decided, I don't really like that idea of a diet, like the temporary sort of like, I'm going to eat like this for this amount of time and lose this much weight. Like I never really did well with that stuff. For me, it was always like, I need to make a lifestyle change and do something. Like when I was young, I was in high school and I started working out, and I was, I remember I was working out 3 days a week. My dad had bought some weight set or some shit. And he was like, hey, that's good. You're working out. And he's like, you got to do this for the rest of your life. And I was like, oh shit. Like I never thought about it like that. I was pretty young. And so I was doing really well. I guess this is the first time I can remember this happening. So I was doing really well. Had I stuck with it, I would have a lot better habits. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe my body'd be all jacked up or something. Who knows? But what ended up happening back then was, I was doing really well, and I think I was working out steady for a few weeks or something, and then I got the flu real bad, and I think it knocked me out of commission for a few days, and then I never really got back into it. And so it's almost like, I don't know, it's I guess that's not really a good example, but like when you say, I'm going to skip this workout because I just don't feel like doing it, that is, in my opinion, that's kind of a failure. That's when and maybe that's a strong word. That's the way I look at it. I'm not saying you failed. I'm saying that for me, I failed. If I know I should do something and the only reason I'm not doing it is because I don't want to, I see that as a failure. So what I think could happen psychologically is your perception of that failure may lead to, oh, well, I already fucked up that. And so I might as well just stay off track. In fact, I had already wrote this all out, and I was listening to Alex Hermosi podcast episode this morning, and he was talking about something like this, where he was saying, if you're on a diet and you eat fucked up, a lot of people will say something like, all right, I'm off my diet because you fucked up that one time. Whereas the better way to go is to course correct and get back on track. So one example that he said is like, let's say you're counting calories and you went 100 calories over. It doesn't mean you're going to give yourself a free pass to eat 15 pizzas because you're like, oh, well, I miss my calorie point. I might as well just fuck off this whole thing. He was saying, just do 100 calories less the next day, and then you're maintaining your goal. And those are the kind of things I think, I don't consciously think about that stuff, but I think that's sort of how it leads in the direction of, the slippery slope, like where I'm at right now. Like I'm pretty disappointed in myself that my shorts don't fit me right. And I'm pretty fucking disappointed that I have shirts that I don't want to wear because they don't fit right. So I want to get back to that as quick as possible. I'm also going to be 50 in 3 months. And I'm like, man, I want to enter my 50s in the best shape I've ever got in. So I got 3 months to get my shit together. And I kind of wish I didn't compromise as much leading up to now. So if I had been starting this 3 months where I was, I don't know, maybe a couple months back, I'd be entering 50 probably a lot better, but we'll see. I'm going to get it together, but it's very important, like I was saying, what Alex Hermosi said, to recognize these little slips as a temporary thing. It's not, that's where I think a lot of people fuck up is like, when you start sliding down that slope and you're like, well, fuck it, and you start saying fuck it to too many different things. What's more healthy is if you fuck up and the next day, maybe you're disappointed and you're like, you know what? I totally fucked up. Instead of like thinking, well, fuck it. I'm just going to do whatever. The better way to go is to course correct and maybe go a little harder that next day, make up for it. I don't know, whatever it is you have to do to get back on track. So it sort of comes down to creating this sort of personal rules for yourself. So for me, they're not really written down, but it's like things that I've sort of developed over time. There's certain things that I do, like I eat healthy, I exercise, I meditate, I make sure I'm not getting complacent in my relationship and things like that. So I don't know, maybe I should write these things down and maybe that would be a healthy thing to do. But if you have these rules, you can always go back on. So if you do fuck up, you're like, you know what, this is just, I fucked up this day and I'm going to get back on track. It's interesting too, because if you think about failure and kind of overcoming the failure, you're still benefiting from that if you bounce back from it, because you're building up mental toughness, you're building up resilience and all that kind of shit. So that might be another mindset shift to where when you fuck up, instead of beating yourself up about it, you might think of it as an opportunity. And this isn't like giving yourself a pass to fuck up to keep trying to build up this mental toughness. But let's say you fuck up on whatever it is that you're doing. And I'll give some other examples. I know I'm kind of talking about diet and shit, but that's sort of where I'm at right now. But if you fuck up and you recognize that you fucked up and then you course correct and you get back on track, you've kind of made a deposit in your sort of mental toughness bank account, your resiliency bank account, if you want to think of it like that. So every time you overcome a failure, you get a little bit stronger. So it's not all bad when you slip off track. I mean, you actually have a little bit of an opportunity to kind of build up a little bit of that. It was something that I was doing a little research on this topic, and something that I came across that I thought was pretty interesting that I might try to do is create, you might have heard of it. It's like a if-then planning type of thing. I think it's like it's also in like a programming language. Like if this happens, then do this. If this happens, then do that. So what if you kind of created sort of an if-then system for yourself for the things that you want to stay on track with? So if you're a graph writer and you want to say paint once a week, or maybe more, I don't know, X amount of times a week. Let's say if you fall off, then what are you going to do? So let's say you fuck up and you skip a week, then what? Okay, so then next week I have to make up for it. I got to do 2 or 3 things or whatever that is your goal is. If you fuck up on your exercise, then what? I'm going to do my normal workout plus I'm going to walk for 45 minutes. Something like that. Like, what if you created a system for yourself so that you're already sort of ready with a response? You have like a sort of a pre-programmed response for course correcting yourself. I wanted to kind of give some other examples of things that I've kind of noticed this slippery slope happen, just so that it's not just about this diet and exercise. Obviously, that's the one that I'm talking about right now. And like I just mentioned with graffiti, this is something that happens to me all the time. And a lot of graffiti writers can probably relate to this, especially the older ones. When you have momentum, and I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit, but have you noticed that, like, let's say you're sort of off your game and you haven't painted for a little while, and then you go paint, and then you just want to go paint again the next day. And, you know, it kind of fires you up a little bit. So that happens to me all the time. And, you know, in the 90s, I was all about painting. That's all I thought about. Then I went to college, and it sort of put some distance between me and the scene. And then I took another few years off. So I was off for quite a while, maybe 8 years or I think it was like 6 years, because I still painted a little while I was in college. But I think the break between the 90s and the 2000s was about six years from, well, not the 90s. Fuck. It was like 2000 to 2006. I think I didn't paint at all. And then when I got into it, like I pretty quickly got momentum going, but that only lasted a few years. And then I remember the last time I painted, something kind of frustrating happened with another crew, and it just was kind of a weird situation. And it kind of, I don't know, politics, not with my current crew, but just some other shit. So then I didn't feel like painting, you know, after that. And I was painting every weekend pretty much. Maybe not every weekend, but I was painting when the weekends would come around. The plan was to paint, you know? So, but after I sort of compromised, and I was like, I'm not going to go this weekend. Next weekend came around. There's sort of ideas sort of popping in my head, like, you know, I don't want to drive all the way down there. And maybe it's like, it's hot, and I don't want to be out there all sweaty, and just all these kind of like, you know, that shit that goes on inside your mind that sort of talks you out of doing something that you think you should do. And for me, it was important that I maintained my sort of, I don't know what you would call it. Like, I wanted to maintain my skills, and I wanted to sort of, after that time off, I wanted to make sure I maintained my name in the scene and all that stuff. So the more I compromised, the easier it became to talk myself out of it, until I wasn't even thinking about painting it anymore. And I took another few years off. So between like 2010 to 2014, I don't think I painted at all. Maybe 2013. I don't know what it was, but it's the same shit. Like, I just kind of talked myself out of it. And the further you get away from it, the easier it is to stay away from it. And so I'm kind of in that mode right now. Like, I don't remember, I think the last time I painted was at that MSK thing. And that was, I don't even know, like a couple months ago already. Time's flying by, and I still haven't even done anything. And that same fucking dialogue goes on in my head every time I think about painting. I'm like, man, I don't want to drive all the way down there. It's starting to get hot again. Going to get all sweaty, and like, what colors am I going to use? And just letting myself, like, it's not like it used to be for me. You know, it's like, I didn't think about shit like that when I was younger, man. I was looking at some old photos, and it was like, some of the color schemes, like, were just so fucking out there. Like, it's almost like I wasn't even, like, I just put the cans together. I'm like, yeah, that'll work. You know, there's pieces. I just looked at a piece. It was like outlined. What the fuck was it? Was outlined in white. The highlights were red. The fucking background was brown, fucking Krylon leather brown. And the inside of the fill was like a color scheme that I would just never come up with now. It was like a beige and like a hunter green, and there was some fucking gold in there, like literal metallic gold. You know, it was just like it was obvious I just like painted with what I had. And I think I need to get back. I think I need to get back on that. Like that's probably one of the things that's kind of, you know, it's like, what colors am I going to use when I go and stand in front of, like, because I mean, I have a graph shop, so there's like so many fucking colors, so hundreds of cans. It's like, it's not like it was before where you open your bag and you're like, I'll make this work, you know? So I don't know, kind of getting off track, but it's applicable. It's relevant to what I'm talking about, because it's one of those things that allows me to talk myself out of going and painting. And that shit's really important to me. So it's like, your hobbies are important. You got to think of them, or I mean, not so much hobbies, but like things that make you happy. Like, you got to do that stuff. Like, if you put off that stuff, I think it's just as bad as like putting off work and putting off anything else. Like, if that's where your happiness is, and like, I don't like painting as much as I used to, but like, I love having that shit in existence, if that makes sense. Like, it's not so much the process anymore for me. It's the when it's done and it's up there and it's out there in the fucking scene, like that brings me happiness. So I should be doing that. But I fucking talk myself out of it. And I'm so far down on the slippery slope with putting off graffiti that it's going to be challenging to try to get myself onto a schedule, but I really need to do that. So another example, and might be relatable to you, is like I used to play bass when I was younger. Like, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but I used to play in hardcore bands, and sometimes people are really surprised. Like, I used to play guitar for this band called Strife. I was in there for like a year and a half or something like that. Did some tours with them, and it was all a good time. I didn't really contribute to that band. I was mainly just like, they put me in as a guitarist when they needed a guitarist. But then after that, I started a band called Eyelid, and I played bass, and I was, that band and graffiti was like my whole fucking existence for several years. Well, graffiti for much longer, but I think I was in that band from like maybe 94 to 98 or something like that. And it was like everything to me, you know, playing bass and all that shit. And then after the band broke up, I just didn't play bass anymore. Like almost never, like for fucking 20 years. Like I didn't even pick it up. Like still sitting here, like I got basses and shit. And so I bought a bass, like the Slayer fucking signature. It's the Tom Araya signature bass. So I'm like, I'm going to buy that. Fucking that seems cool. So I bought it thinking that it was going to get me all hyped up to play again. And it didn't. Like I needed a mindset shift for that. But then my girlfriend was always asking me, hey, when are you going to play bass again? And it got me thinking. I'm like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna commit to doing this. So I started playing bass again, and I committed to being able to play this one classical fucking song, because like playing a classical song, I think it's I don't know. When I was younger, I learned how to play the prelude on the Bach prelude. I don't know how you say it, on the bass, and it was so fucking hard to do. I was like, I'm committed by the end of the year. I'm gonna learn how to play this again. And I was on this like good momentum, you know, I had a good streak going, and then all of a sudden I compromised, and then I just fucking never picked it back up again. So I'm back on that again. Like I haven't played bass in I don't know, like a year now. So the other thing I do is I've talked about it in previous episodes. It's a thing called the power list. You write down 5 critical tasks that you need to get done. Super powerful. It's very highly recommended. I would, if you want to look into that a little further, I don't want to take up too much time talking about it, but it's basically just breaking down these 5 critical tasks that are going to move your life forward. So it could be anything from fitness to business. A lot of mine are business. But if I start to compromise on the power list and I start to get too many losses, for context, if you finish all your 5 critical tasks, then it's considered that you won that day. If you don't, then you lost that day. So the more losses I start putting together, the easier it is to be like, fuck it, I'll just take a loss for today. Probably the biggest one for me, the biggest realization was reading. Like I was on this path of reading 10 pages every single day. Like it was tied into another morning habit. As soon as I would start making coffee, I'd grab my Kindle, and I thought that habit was so locked in that it was unbreakable, until I decided not to read one day. And it wasn't because like anything happened or like my schedule was all fucked up and I had to wake up and just go somewhere and I wasn't able to do that. I just didn't feel like it. So I didn't do it. And then that made it easier and easier to not read again. I mean, like I haven't been on like a no reading, but I definitely compromised that one time and started slipping down the slope, and to where I still haven't quite got it completely back. So like now I still read every day, but sometimes like I'll be on like my goal is to read 10 pages every day for my whole life. And so right now, like, even though I'm still reading every day, like a lot of times I'll be like, all right, that's 6 pages. That's good enough. And it all started from that one compromise. It's so crazy. Like you would think that after like having something so solidified as a habit that you'll never have to really use willpower to get yourself to do it again. But I'm finding that that's where I'm at now. It's pretty crazy. And like, even with that idea that like I've started to slip down the slope, I even noticed like my reading comprehension kind of slipped a little bit, because if I'm using willpower to, like on times where I'm like, you know what, I just don't feel like reading, but I'll grab the Kindle anyway. I'm like, fuck, I just got to do it. Like, I got to make sure I do this. I think it's because I've had to pull some willpower and kind of force myself to do it. I'm not quite as into it. And whereas when it was like a complete habit and it was like, this is just what's going to happen, like everything just was fine. It was like flowing, reading, everything's cool. Like, obviously I'm not like retaining every single thing I read. That's not really how it works, but it was like, I was still in the flow of reading. And a lot of times, like, I'm like, oh shit, that's 12 pages. I'm going to stop now. Like I'm having to build that habit back up. And it's just interesting that it all started with one compromise. Like, it's just so weird how that works. So another thing, and I really only have one action step, but before I get into that, I want to talk about another thing that relates to this that I came across in my research. It's a phrase called ego depletion. I should have wrote the guy's name down, but I'm sure if you searched ego depletion, you probably find some information on it. But the concept is that your willpower is like a limited resource. So the more you have to like convince yourself to get something done. So in the case of any of the stuff that I talked about, the more I have to sit there and try to go to battle with that voice in my head. Like when I need to get my workout done and I don't want to, and my brain is telling me, oh, you could take a day off. It's not a big deal, fucking whatever, all the shit that goes on in your mind. So the amount of self-control and willpower that it takes to talk yourself out of that inner voice, this concept kind of talks about how that's a limited resource. So the more you have to force yourself to do something, the more you're sort of depleting that resource. So what happens is, and how it relates to this is, so let's say you're on a good path and you've created a good habit of doing whatever it is every day. Let's say you're on a habit of playing whatever musical instrument every day, or eating healthy food every day, whatever that is for you. It becomes easier and easier to stay on it the more you're on it. But then when you start to make those compromises, then all of a sudden you have to start pulling into that resource to get yourself to do it. Because like if you eat some shitty food when you've been on a good path of eating healthy, maybe not the one time you eat the shitty food, but like if you kind of let yourself slip off track, then you really have to, like, next time the opportunity comes to eat something that you shouldn't eat, you really have to kind of draw on that willpower in order to keep yourself from doing it. Whereas when you're on a streak and you're on a habit, you kind of don't even really think about that stuff. You're like, nah, I'm not going to eat that. I'm going to eat the shit that I've been eating. You don't even really think about it. It doesn't require any willpower. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about if your willpower is a limited resource. And so the only real action step that I have is in order to avoid this, in order to overcome this, if you slip off of it, is to build and maintain momentum. So I'm probably going to revisit this subject, but I did do a whole episode on this a while back, but I think it's due to kind of revisit because I probably have some new shit that I'm thinking about. But here's the thing. We've all experienced this. When you have that momentum, you don't actually need your willpower. So your willpower is in there on reserve. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say you've solidified something into habit. Every day you get up and you don't have to talk yourself into doing that anymore. Every day you get up, or whatever it is, every day you know this is going to happen. It's not even a question. That's momentum. That's how you get out of this shit. That's how you avoid this shit. And once you have the momentum, that's where it's sort of critical to maintain it in some way. The thing is, like, there's always going to be some reason to get off track, But if you have momentum, it's very important to try not to get off track in order to maintain it. Because as you've noticed, when you're in that state, it's just so easy to stay on track. Like whenever I'm doing 75 hard, once I'm a few days in, I got all the momentum in the world. There's nothing outside of something completely out of my control that's going to stop me from doing those tasks. There's not even a question of whether or not I'm going to do both workouts, whether or not I'm going to read 10 pages. It's not a question at all. So I'm not pulling on that resource. So I don't know. I'll probably read more about it. But according to this ego depletion thing, if you have momentum in all the areas that you want to have momentum in, and you're moving forward, you have all that willpower on reserve for if something goes wrong. So imagine if you're sitting there just cruising along, you're doing all the shit you're supposed to do and everything's kind of working out. And then all of a sudden something happens. You have to do some emergency trip, or you break your toe or some shit like that. You have all that willpower sort of stocked up and just sort of waiting for you, because you're not having to use it. So let's say you do fall off track, like what happened to me. I fell off track. So now I got to build up the momentum again. I'm on my way there, but I'm still needing to pull on that willpower reserve, so I'm not quite out of the woods yet, but I'm on my way out. So for me, just knowing this whole thing, like once I get to the point where I'm on a streak and I have momentum, it's going to be so much easier. Like right now is so much harder because I have to kind of talk myself into these behaviors again. Once I don't have to do that anymore, everything's easy. It's easy to work out every day when you're on a streak. That's just what it is. And when I tell people, when they say something like, well, I can't do that because I like to put sugar in such and such. And I'm like, well, that's what you like now, but you can train yourself to not like that. Like an example that people say all the time is like, I can't do 75 hard, or I can't do this, whatever it is, because I really like to have a lot of cream and sugar in my coffee. And yeah, when I used to drink coffee early on, that's all I would have it like this creamy, disgusting, sugary shit. It's gross for me now to think about. Like I can't even drink that shit anymore. But like I couldn't imagine drinking black coffee at that time. But at one point I made a decision and I was like, look, I'm going to learn to like black coffee. Like it tastes disgusting, but that's all I'm going to allow myself to have, because I got to get off of this fucking sugary cream bullshit. Like I got to be done with this. And so now it's the other way around. Now I prefer to not have anything in my coffee. That's a weird example, but it makes sense. The further away I get away from that sugary shit, the more I sort of get trained to crave the other, so like the more I stay away from unhealthy foods and stick to only healthy foods, that's what I crave. That's what I want to eat. I want to eat the healthy food. When I'm on, and I've talked about it a bunch, how I hate working out, but like that's only when I'm off track. When I'm on track, like I don't necessarily love it, but it's like it just happens. It's just, this is what I do. So that's pretty much the only action step. Build and maintain momentum. You can use streaks to do that. Like, so try to set yourself up with like, track how many days in a row you did the thing that you're supposed to do. Let's say for my shit, like if I wanted to start doing graph once a week, I could start tracking that and say, I'm going to do a piece every single week. And 5 weeks in, I got a good streak going. 6 weeks in, I got a streak going. By the end of the year, if I've painted 52 times, that's quite a serious streak for me that I don't want to break. I mean, I know to so many young people, it's like, oh shit, only 52 pieces a year. That's nothing. I understand. I'm old, so give me a break, but, and the same thing with like any other thing. You want to play a musical instrument. You want to practice 20 minutes a day. You get a good streak going. It becomes harder and harder to get yourself it becomes easier and easier to stay on track. And it actually becomes harder that little voice in your head kind of goes away. So build that momentum, maintain it when you have it. That's pretty much all I got. One thing I wanted to ask, if you don't mind, if you're getting anything out of this show, If you don't mind sharing it, I'm trying to grow this thing. I would really appreciate it. You can throw it up on your Instagram or go leave me a review on whatever platform you're listening on. It would be very helpful. We also still have that Discord community. So if you're getting anything out of this and you want to have conversations with like-minded people, send me a message at bus166 on Instagram. And as I mentioned before, I've been fucking with Twitter. I've been enjoying it over there. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, bus166 MSK over there. All right. Appreciate you guys, and I will see you soon. All right. Good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.